crazy number.
Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Today we're recording episode 66. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'm very excited to have tonight's guest. But before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce my book, which is same title as this podcast, which is A Gift from Adversity. And this is a book that I published in 2020 and it's available on Amazon. A Gift from Adversity's subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. And I've experienced all of this growing up in Japan. And after I published my book, I have a lot of people reach out to me and share their adversities. And I felt compelled to create a platform where people can share their adversities, but not only that, tools that they use to overcome, and also a gift that came from it. And this has been my vision and my manifestation since the beginning of this year, or even before. But this year, I was determined to create this platform and a podcast. I'm very grateful for all the guests who came to A Gift from Adversity and share their stories. But not only that, listeners and people who got inspired by having this conversation, reaching out to me to be my podcast. And if you're listening and want to share your adversity, please reach out to me. So let's invite tonight's guest. Her name is Anna Scoby. Hi, Anna.
Good, good evening. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for tuning in and coming to A Gift from Adversity. So, can you tell our audience your name, where you're located, and what you do, and if you have a website or social media handle that you want to share with our audience?
My name is Anna Scoby. I am located currently in California, in Aliso Viejo, in sunny California. And I am a communication coach. I work with kids, youth of all ages, and I teach them how to use their words and instill the confidence in them so they can be themselves and be empowered. And my website is projectbu.com. My Instagram is projectbu by Anna. Just like that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that. And Anna, let's jump into our first question, which is the adversity. So, can you share our audience? What was your adversity?
Well, I am an immigrant and English is my second language. And for the longest time, that was an adversity. When I started working, when I just started to get into the workforce, quite often I was told that I'm not good enough because I don't have enough English. I don't have good enough English. I don't have an experience. At the time of me searching at the beginning, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. When you don't have too much of it, you're an immigrant, you don't have that much of an experience, you don't have that much of a language. But I was a single mom, so I had to figure this out. I went to an employment agency, and at some point, I had one of those orientation interview where they trying to figure out where they can place you and what job would be suitable to you. And I had one of my counselor who looked at me and said, with you being a single mom, barely having kind of an education, you probably the best you can do is being a cashier at the grocery store if you're lucky. We're not sure if we can help you. And that was crazy to me in a sense, because it was a very low blow into a self-esteem. When you think, a land of opportunity, you can be anything and anybody. And then you have this, in a sense, reality check with, hey, the best you can do is being a cashier. Well, it took some pick me up from that point, and I started answering to some of the ads. And lucky for me, I found one ad that said, "We need you to speak Russian." And I thought, all right, this is the job. I'm going to establish my career. I'm going to jumpstart into it. I went for an interview. It was a rough interview because I haven't really had someone who would speak myself. And it seemed like the manager was pretty in her own world. She was really in her own world. But I got the job because I spoke the language she needed. They were opening the store in one of the communities, and they needed someone who would speak Russian. And I've had a hard time getting into it because little did I knew it was all about sales. And that's the last thing I thought I was going to do. I didn't think I was good at it. I didn't think it was something that I was interested in. And at the time, she was straight to the point. She was like, you know what? You're good enough and I need to step it up. And one of the days she came to me and she was like, you know what? The only reason about you that would have kept you in this job. So that was an experience for the second time, was kind of, you kind of get a feel for maybe trend of not of being reminded that something needs to be done. In my journey, I was thinking this is going to be okay. In my journey, I was, in a sense, pushed by those who were telling me I can't do it. But I also had those who said, you know what, you can, just despite and just to prove them wrong. So at some point, some other managers had noticed that I've had a struggle with the manager, that we've had a clash. And at some point, a few of them came up and said, you know what, while you may not have a language, you do have the personality. And that's where it was an interesting turn, I think, with this kind of a statement that, hey, you may not necessarily have to have the skill just yet, but you have this drive and you have this personality. So slowly, it's starting to kind of balancing off between my manager saying, hey, you are just not good enough, and a few of other people who start noticing and coming to me and said, you do have what it takes, you just need a different manager. So as the luck would have it, the manager was transferred to another store, got promoted in a sense, and there was no one left at the store that she left. So a few managers said, hey, why don't you kind of take care of it for a little bit? It was a little tiny store, and we'll help you and let her do the thing. And slowly the luck's starting to turn. I think that would be, I'm sure there's a few other stories I can think of and come up with, but that would be a biggest vivid experience of remembering of not being able to speak the proper language, of feeling like I am not good enough, of feeling like, okay, I don't belong here because I'm not as good as everybody else around me. You are muted.
What age you came to America, and then why you came to America, and from where? Russia.
Well, I grew up in a small little peninsula by the Black Sea. I grew up in Crimea, and I immigrated here. I was in my teens. I graduated from school here, and it so happened I fall in love. I was young and I fall in love, and that's how I end up being a single parent. Obviously, didn't work out, and I stayed here because of opportunities. I felt as this is the country where I can raise my child and give him everything he needed.
So I came to America when I was 18 for the first time, 17, 18. And then first time was 2 weeks. And then I went back to Japan. And then I came back for 6 months exchange program. And I remember feeling very, very, very low because of my English. And I was thrown into American senior high school. For even American kids, the senior is intense year to learn a lot of complicated materials. For some reason, my counselor thought methodology is easy. Then I had no idea. And then when I was reading textbook, I was so lost. So my host mom or her drawing like three head snakes, like pictures, like my host father trying to explain to me about affirmative action because sometimes we have to read an article on Times Magazine and like bring some opinion and I had no idea. And to me, I came here when I was like senior high school that where I fully was able to communicate with my friends and everything in Japanese, obviously. Well, when I came here, um, I really felt like not deaf, but I just couldn't understand what was going on. And it was so fast. People are talking. I felt like people
You
are
know,
talking
I was
fast. What did you say?
I was in high school too. I was a senior in high I was a senior in high school and I was an exchange student. So that's how my journey started here too. And I remember my counselor thought that AP chemistry was a good idea because I studied chemistry back home. And I remember opening the textbook and I'm thinking, I have no idea what this is in any kind of language. Like I don't think I understand anything. But again, there were people around me. My host mom also ended up going to school with me and asking if we can move my classes a little bit. And then the teachers were responding and teachers were helping and helpful to a certain degree. So I can relate to thinking like this was not a good idea. This was not a good this was not a good idea at all.
And I remember the days when I was, I tried to study, I tried to understand, but I just couldn't understand. And I remember the days that I was crying and, you know, I don't know, it was just so hard. It was just really, really, really hard. But it was fun. I had PE and then choir. I played piano. So luckily, two classes were different choir class accompaniment. So I was able to accompany in trouble with the choir. It was so much fun. And PE, I didn't know that it was co-ed. So that was shocking because in Japan, it was boy and girls are separated for PE. So it was really interesting. But, language, when you go to a new country, like in any country you go to, like it's such a big wall. Now I speak English okay, and then being a journalist and then writing a lot of articles, but still people would say like, oh, can you speak English because of my look? So I would say yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then obviously, accent too. And then I can never speak like natives, but those definitely can affect you. And then after you graduated high school, so when you became a single mom and then was told that, oh, maybe you can get a cashier job and stuff, like, do you remember specifically how you felt that moment?
Well, I think that was after the initial emotional outburst that, oh my God, I can't believe, this is my future. Because for a second, you have this person who supposedly an authority in a sense, and who is supposed to guide you through the process, and you kind of look up to them for the solutions, and the solution is, this is your low paying job, this is it, settle for it and be happy with it and be thankful for it. So it's almost as a certain breaking point is reached in a one way. It breaks the confidence, so you kind of feel like, okay, this is the low end and this is where we will stay for a little bit. But at the same time, probably with my upbringing, the way I was raised, at some point after you're grieving, after the moment, your mind starts thinking, okay, well, what can we do about this? So it was kind of like, how in some personalities, if you encourage someone and they move mountains for you, but for some, you tell them they can't do it and they're going to do it twice just to prove you wrong. So I think that personality of mine kicked in. While I do thrive on the praise and I will move mountains with the kind words, the opposite of that was more of a kick in the butt than anything else could have been at that point. And that was, wait a minute, I can do better. I don't know how, but deep down, I think I can do better, and I'm gonna try to do better. So that was almost like a gift and a curse in a sense. Yes, I reached the breaking point at that time, but at the same time, because of that breaking point, I knew that there's no other way to go but up, because that was down. So, and I did, and I kept that gentleman's business card for the very long time. And every time I would achieve a little bit of a milestone, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to tell him all about it. And then I thought, okay, wait, I'm going to wait a little bit more and I'm going to get to a little bit higher. And then I'm going to go see him. And then I did it and I held on to the card, and it was almost as an additional motivational factor. I would look in this card and I would get mad and I would think, I'm going to prove you wrong, not just by this one. I'm going to do it 3 times. I'm going to do it 4 times. And then I got to a certain level. And I think that's, I guess, when you're healed. When I got at a certain level, and that credit and that business card became less and less important. And it was more like, well, it served its purpose. He probably doesn't even remember. I mean, I'm sure as soon as I left his office, he probably, like, there was another one walking in that he was going to tear apart. I'm sure he had his reasons. I'm sure he had his motives. And perhaps one of his tactics is to bring someone low so they can bounce back up. I don't know. But I remember finding that business card down the road as I was in a better place and thinking, you know what? I'm actually thankful in a sense, as crazy as it sounds, for that kick in the butt that I've got in that office. The same thing goes with that manager who, because the way she treated me, it gave an opportunity for the rest of the people to see it. And in the beginning, it was more like, we feel sorry for you. But then as they start watching it, they start noticing that I do have knowledge, I do have skills. I may not have the language, but I have a work ethics. I have my personality, charming one at some point. And as it turns out, sales is something that I can do. I'm holding it back because I'm waiting for that second part. So I'm not going.
Yes, yes.
I'm not revealing all
Yeah,
the good parts.
let's dissect a little bit, because this is important conversation for a lot of people, not just people who are coming to live in America, but for instance, my friend went to Japan. He's American, and then obviously he struggled learning Japanese, and then really struggled to maybe be accepted in Japanese culture. same thing as my friend who moved to Spain, and she had to learn the Spanish. And in any cases, the expat and or the people that decided to remove themselves completely out of the country that you're used to with the mother language that you completely know, and especially not when you are a child, when your brain is like sponge, and maybe more of less of stigma and then adaptation stage than an adult, like even like late teens, that when you go from one country speaking solid language to a completely different language and country. I think as you are older, I think you struggle more because you have this expectation of yourself of communication, like 100%, like you're able to communicate, and now 0%, you can't communicate with anyone. And that imbalance of your self esteem and self worth, that can really create a mental health problem, sometimes depression, sometimes like what can I do, like almost like a dead end. And it can, like, as I experienced it myself, it can really put pulls on your daily life. And how would you be able to relate to what I just said?
Well, as mentioned earlier too, it's when the self-esteem goes down and goes low, it's almost as if there is this cloud over that prevents you from seeing opportunities, from being able to connect with people, being able to take those daily steps. And I think I would have been probably longer and deeper in there if I wouldn't have my son. And because I think because of him, it was more of, well, I have to snap out of it, whatever that is. So my strategy, as we're learning now, was to bottle in the emotions because somehow I needed to function and move forward. So emotions were bottled in and kind of stored in like a further away shelves. They fall out of those shelves some years later, but in that moment it was more like, okay, this sucks, this isn't what I want, this isn't what I need. However, I just need to snap out of it. So it was more like, okay, we're going to put it in that little box, close it, and then put it away. And that was, I think, my coping mechanism. That, and then I end up with like a closet full of boxes with bottled in emotion. And for the lack of a better word, that came out 20 something years later in a less expected time. So emotions, as we know, they don't just disappear. Yes, we are able to bottle them in. So to answer your question, my coping mechanism was bottling it in. It was putting them away, ignoring it in a sense, and forcefully moving forward with daily functions because I had the little one to figure out. So it was more like he was moving forward. He was my moving force, I guess, at the time.
How did it come out 20 years later?
Well, those emotions eventually, those fears of something's not working out, of things are not coming out, they, how would you, well, let's see, it is hard to kind of explain, but eventually the burden of these emotions becomes heavy. And then you wake up in the morning and you think like, I don't know where to go from here because it's too heavy to kind of carry, I would think. So I think it went in a compounding kind of manner where as we were younger, you were able to kind of carry that weight of emotion just fine. And then as you get older, you start slowing down because that baggage is too heavy, and you start feeling like, okay, there is this unresolved emotion and this unresolved emotion, and it turns to like, okay, how do I move forward with all of this unresolved issues that I've been putting in those boxes? So eventually it turned into a breakdown, a meltdown, and a trip to therapists to figure out what's wrong with me, because I was pretty sure I was broken. But that was 20 years later.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Anna. And this is, again, very meaningful conversation to me because I can totally relate to what you're saying. And then I'm sure a lot of people who had that experience of speaking different language in a certain different countries, and then um, not the emotion part that you compounded and hid in your storage, that you know somehow came out after 20 years or so. Then I feel a lot of us do when you live in different country to pretend that everything's okay, and then moving forward, especially when you're mom, and then you have to be okay. But like for me, I've been in America since 98, and I just think people don't understand the magnitude of prejudice and discrimination against somebody who obviously was not born in this country, but also can't speak perfectly like natives. And they assume that basically we're like an idiot or we don't have any literacy. And then, I was talking to my um, black friend people, and then like I was just talking to them. And I'm a journalist, and I cover the story of Black Lives Matters and then protests and stuff. And I I have a lot of like musician friends, actors friends who are minority and darker skin, and I always tell them, you guys get discriminated by skin of your color, but I'm an Asian, and I get discriminated by my intelligence, like the skill of brain level. So I'm like, that's kind of hurtful too. I was doing Uber Eats, and then this woman, basically the order like stupid, but I think the sprite was missing, and then she wanted to explain to the customer on the other end through my app that he can substitute, but she wasn't sure if I can handle that because obviously I look Asian. So first thing that she said, well, the drink is out, and can you speak English? So I said yes. It's very interesting. But have you had that kind of encounter or like communication, like when people like outright that you get discriminated?
You know what? Other than the few, like in the beginning, where I really couldn't express myself, it was more like, yes, you're not one of us. I felt discriminated based on the fact that I was a woman, more often than the language. Where I was told, if I would have been a guy, I would have been went further in the company, because I've started my career with the wireless company, and at the time, it was dominantly male environment. There were just a few of females who were in the sales force, and there are a few, very even fewer, who were in the managerial positions. And I was fortunate enough to have an amazing mentors who guided me through the process and kind of shield me from the others who were trying to stop me just because of the male female ratio at the company. The company itself promoted the diversity, of course, but on the lower levels, there were a few words where like, hey, what do you know, you're just a girl. I've heard that, and then you add to, oh, you even a girl from a different country. So not only you are a girl, you also are not familiar how things are done and run in this country. So it was more of a combination of those two. But again, I think I was, and I keep saying it because the emphasis is once you get to like the rock bottom and you feel like this little, at some point there is that other person who sees you there and tries to, in a lot of cases, pick you up from there. So I was always fortunate enough to have that someone to dig me out of that dark place every time I was trying to get in there.
Anna, I really appreciate you sharing this conversation with me because, to be honest with you, like I think I could have used this conversation, could have learned so much from what we are talking about when I was 18 years old, being an exchange student. And one of the things that I remember, like the teacher was saying, because I was very, very like depressed and crying, and I was like, oh, I can't understand. I don't know what people say. And then he was so kind. He spoke very slowly and said, Juri, look around all the kids. They only speak English. That you already know Japanese. They don't know the Japanese. You already mastered one language. So don't feel bad. You are superior than them because I was so much of the inferiority complex stage, and I felt like so worthless. And then communication is just such a key. And then until you hit that wall that you can't understand what is going on, it is just so hard. I remember my first time I came to America, my host mother like said, bring your wallet or something. I had no idea what she said. So I only heard let's, I went to toilet. Like I had no idea, no idea. So that's a guessing game, and then when you guess wrong, it's just wrong, and then you pretend so much, and then you just get used to it, and then you keep making mistakes. But then when I learned Spanish later on in my life, and I went to Spain, I was more confident because I already had that kind of I think strength of it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to not be able to understand perfectly. And it's okay to have this guessing game stage and be able to get through the day. Because when I was in Spain by myself for 3 weeks, I was sometimes, guessing. Then try I try to say something and sometimes I was completely wrong, or sometimes I was right. So it's just like testing the water with the new environment and language. By the way, one of my friends, Scoby, he's a very talented musician from Jamaica. He was on my show. He said, I love your podcast and then healing people worldwide. That's what he said.
I watched him when you send me your invite and you send me a few ideas to get an idea of how you host it. So I watched him giving his story too and how music saved him. So I could totally relate. I like the name, the Scorpio.
Oh,
Yeah.
so shout out to Scorpio. Thank you.
Yes.
So Anna, let's move on to the second question, which you kind of mentioned a little bit, but let's dive into and focus on the tools that you use to overcome all these challenges and adversities. Now, I always tell my guests this is my favorite part of the podcast because a lot of times when people are going through a hard time and then people who's never been through that hard time, the people who had never been raped, who had never been homeless or abused or suffered with, domestic violence, they just say, "Oh, just go get a therapist." And then like the finding a therapist is so much wait list, and sometimes if you don't have insurance, it's so expensive. So my guests so far had shared with me very, very unique tools. Some definitely said therapist, but not just the therapy, but um, this is why I wanted to really create this podcast because this is a surviving skill and coping tools that we are sharing with our audience. So Anna, can you please tell our audience what tools that worked best for you?
Well, there are a few, and I'm glad that you had mentioned the therapist. I'm just going to say a few words. I didn't get to the therapist until I was in my 40s. And it is my biggest regret because I reinvented the wheel on my own. You know, culturally, I was raised to not admit that there's something wrong and pretend like things are okay and work through this, work through pain, work through challenge, work through adversity. You just work and you make it, and you just have to make it no matter how hard it is. And a lot of times it was that, you know, let's make this, we're just going to make it harder. I now looking back, of course, I realized that I could have done slightly better and easier on myself if I would have had a professional, you know. But that aside, everybody knows it's helpful, it's needed. The therapists are there, especially our good ones, are magical workers. However, not every time we have the opportunity. So a few things. One of, again, as I mentioned, one of my mentors suggested, it was like a simple phrase. When I would struggle with some kind of an issues and some kind of a challenges, the biggest advice I got on a professional level was to take the feel out of it. You know how often when we have a challenge, we keep saying, I feel like you don't understand me. I feel like you don't hear me. I feel like you're messing with me. I feel like you're out to get me. So his advice was, take the feel out and focus on the fact. What is the problem? What is the challenge? Not the feelings, but the challenge itself. So if you able to separate those two, then you can handle the emotions, which is hard on its own, not mixing anything else on it. So you handle one thing, you handle your feel, and you handle it with the glass of wine, with your friends, with long drive, with loud music, whatever it is that helps you deal with your feel. And then you use your logic and you deal with what is the challenge. So in a sense, you know, that concept of get out of your head. So it's in a sense taking the feel out of it and looking at it like, this is what I feel, this is the emotions that are messing with me and preventing me from focusing on this thing that I can fix. So once you take emotions out and you handle them, you are able to focus on the challenge. My challenge was simple. Well, now I call it simple. Back then it seemed like the biggest challenge ever. My challenge was I needed English, right? So I start looking around. I start seeing what is out there, what is available. And as I was going through my career journey and being in the sales, I was put into the sales training. And with the sales training, we did the role play, least of my favorite things, but it works as much as I hate it. I was able to realize at some point that it's not the lack of English that my problem. My problem was the lack of confidence. Because when I did speak with those who were kind and open to me, they would all say, I understand you perfectly. You may not use an extensive vocabulary, but I understand what you're saying. I can follow you. And because of this, you are selling. Your customers are following you. They understand what you're saying. So it's not the lack of the English per se, it was the lack of confidence. So I start looking around and because of the training, I start reading some books just for sales. How do you sell more? Because I was making commissions. So the more I sold, the more money I made. And I was reading some books. It seemed like it was so long ago. YouTube wasn't really that popular. We didn't have Pinterest. The Facebook wasn't there. The Instagram wasn't there. I know I sound like my daughter keeps saying, Mom, you sound like a dinosaur. I sound like a dinosaur. But when I first started, resources were pretty much libraries and the bookstores.
Sure.
And at the little store that I worked, we didn't have a bathroom. for us to go to the bathroom, we had to go through into the bookstore, into Barnes and Nobles. So I would go to the bathroom in Barnes and Nobles, and it was a 2-story or 3-story building, and the bathroom was on the very top. So I would walk through the book aisles and I would see what's out there. And I remember just, my employees would hate when I go to the bathroom because they were like, 2 hours later, what are you doing? I was like, I was reading books. I found the book on my way. So I started reading books on the confidence building, the most common one that Tony Robinson, I can't think of, it's been so long ago, like the beginning of how do you sell, how do you perform? And from there, I was able to connect it to, okay, perhaps it is the confidence. And with that came my second biggest discovery, and that is Toastmasters International. Toastmasters International is a nonprofit communication educational organization that's dedicated to adults and helping them establish their communication skills, their speaking skills. They're not teaching you English, because at that point I realized that I can build a sentence. I know the tenses in the verbs. I can tell the adjective between the noun. I didn't need someone to give me the rules. I needed someone to help me use the right words and for me to build my confidence to speak. And one of my friends in the sales force said, hey, try this. Try the Toastmasters International. They are known for boosting confidence in speaking. So I attended a few meetings, and it felt as I was home for the first time in the longest time. When I walked into that meeting, I felt as I was surrounded by all the people who wanted to help. But that was the beginning of my journey, because with that came work, which means I had to get up and actually speak. But that wasn't bad. There's still more. After you speak, you get a feedback. And that's the part where everybody tells you what you did very well, but they also tell you what you did wrong. And I remember in the very beginning dreading that part, because some of the members would come in and say, you keep using the wrong words. You keep using the wrong tenses. You keep mixing up the order of the words, the order of the sentences. So with the time in the beginning, I remember once again feeling like this little. But then there was always this one person who would come in with the bigger smile and would say, that was better than the last time. Keep going, keep going. And with time, I start noticing that instead of being scared of that feedback, I actually start looking forward to it, because to me, it turned as, in a sense, a game. How many mistakes can I make comparing to the previous speech? So that came my second realization. No, wait, that would be third. My third tip is to be kind to yourself and make it in a sense a game. So instead of beating yourself up with, okay, you made another mistake, you did it wrong again, look at it as, I said the word wrong again. And as I start approaching it with, okay, I can exhale, they are not here to get me, they are actually here to help me. And being willing to accept that help, because what I've learned, and that could be totally my perspective, what I've learned as an immigrant, once you are somewhat relaxed and receptive to learning, a lot of people will come to help, because they sense that you are here to learn, and they're sensing that you are willing to hear, and they're not looking at it as, oh, I can't wait to tell you all the things you did wrong. We all looked at it as, it's a journey, and we're all learning, and we're all making mistakes. And in the Toastmaster settings, I wasn't the only one receiving the feedback. The roles rotate. So at some point, I was given the feedback as well. So that's starting to build up a little bit of an empowerment in the sense that, oh, wait, it's not my first language and you want me to give you the feedback? Why? And what I was told is you have a different perspective. We want feedback from different perspective. And I think that was kind of maybe one of the first times when I was pointed out that, hey, your what I thought adversity is actually in some instances is an advantage because you have a different perspective. So, which means you look at things differently, which means you stand out, which is in a lot of cases a good thing because you're being noticed by things that you do and the things that you've learned. And then at that point came some of the compliments like the accent is cute, don't ever lose the accent because the accent makes you unique. So these little things kind of start again waiting that, okay, this is horrible, to, oh, it kind of feels good to get a compliment. And it kind of feels good to for someone to come in and say, you know what, this was better than last time. And I've been with Toastmasters for over 10 years, 15 years now. I've lost count. And I'm still learning and I'm still growing and I'm feeling inspired every time I go to the meetings. I've made a long lasting friendships because of the Toastmasters, because those people who actually did wanted to see me succeed. And it's a different kind of a feel when you have that shift in the mindset from they're out to get me to, okay, what are the chances that they want to help me? And after giving it a try, giving it a chance, I realized that most of the people do want to help for whatever reason, to make themselves feel better, for them to show off, whatever the reason, I was willing to accept the help. Because again, with the my background was the culture, a lot of times accepting help was a sign of weakness and it was unacceptable. I'm still having a hard time asking for help. I'm getting better, but it's still, I'm learning and people around me training me to ask for help. But accepting that help, it's a whole level, different level of liberation when you come in and say, I'm upset right now and I need this, or I'm very nervous and I need this, or I'm learning English and I need your help. Would you please listen to how I speak and give me a feedback so I can get better? There is a sense of liberation when you stop being your own critic and keep pointing things, all the things you do wrong. You already know it, and start being your own cheerleader. It goes way further when you start saying, okay, we didn't do good today, and it's okay. We made mistakes, we've learned, we reached out for help, and we survived. And people genuinely want to help for the most part, at least with the Toastmasters organization, with the friends that I've made from there. It felt as it was an amazing support system for me.
So I want to really appreciate you. I'm kind of typing as you say these tools. Um, First of all, I just want to go back a little bit about taking out the feeling from the facts that you can fix. It's so important that I was told by my dear karate masters that I was taking karate for a while. He said, maybe you have to stop dramatizing. And I've never heard of dramatizing because there's a trauma, but like you said, the emotion and how you feel like upset and then frustration. Again, if you take that out, you don't have to react to this nonsense and you can just take an action by even legal force using the resources. And not engage with that feeling and emotion part, and then not dramatize and telling people what had happened, which I've done a lot. But then I didn't really deal with the factual and the part that I could tackle and then be able to change. And when I became single mom, one of my friends told me, just, you know, think this is a business transaction, like administration work. Do not put your emotion to it. So similar to what your mentor was saying, and that saved me so much. And then at the end of the day, Anna, some people who are, you know, I don't want to say this word, but not, well, I don't know, intentionally or not intentionally, not nice to you, or maybe they have their own insecurity. I've I've gotten so many people say positive things, but also very negative things. But then, if you give in the emotions and the feelings for them, and then it's gonna be waste of your day, waste of your energy. And I've learned that even recently, to really block them, like delete my daughter's. She's 6 years old. Mom, just block them, delete them.
An
And
easy fix, right? Just block them.
yeah, and my daughter even said to some kid who was bothering her, "Hey, you are popping my personal bubble. Stay away from me." That's what
Oh
she
wow.
said. And I've never learned that kind of tools. So, you know, and again, where you come from and where I come from, we have this thing called honne and tatemae, where honne is a real intention and tatemae is a professed intention, where we were taught to wear a mask. It's called neko kaburu, like wear like a cat mask. So it hide your emotion and
Yep.
just be okay. So like reaching out, admitting that you need help, those are the barriers as a cultural background. So when you need help the most, especially when we're talking about the language barrier, that I need help to get through this, and but you can't say it because you have this pride and you have this cultural beliefs, and then
Yeah.
you know. And I really like what you're saying about, stop being your critics and then being your cheerleader. And we self sabotage so much than self leverage. And I think, I don't know. Like, I don't think it matters which country you're raised. I think human psychology, I'm not a psychologist, sometimes we beat ourselves more than we somebody beat you, like emotionally. So I really appreciate you sharing this genuine, real tools. And then, in our generation, especially mental health was never really talked about, not so much understanding, especially after the pandemic. Mental health talk is less of the stigma. But like, in Japan, I've never heard of this. So I think that's another generational challenges that we faced. So moving forward, part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast is now you are sharing these tools with our audience, that I'm hoping that even older generations can get something out of it, and then not being able to um, struggle as much as we did, and being able to move forward by using these techniques.
I agree with you. It's we are all raised with those critics. That's just part of it, and that critic is what moving us forward. That's for sure, because that critic is the one that says, "Do harder, do more, keep growing." But then we forgetting that we need that other one that says, "Yay, good job, you did it, you did it." So the goal is really that balance. When you have that critic that points out to some things you can do better, because that's how we're growing, but then also that other one that points out all the things that we did right. And I start using this mindful thing where I filter things I say to myself with the simple filter, I mean, with the simple statement: would you say this to your child? Like, if you say, "Hey, you suck today," would you say that to your child? No, you wouldn't. You would never say that to your child. So why would you say it to yourself? So kind of being aware of that, the first step is really being aware of it. Once you become aware of it, it becomes that habit where you start balancing, like, okay, let's make a list. Here's the 5 things went really well. Here's the 5 things that can do better. And that could be another tip. If you are trying to reflect on things that happened, on things that you need to learn from, do the list, but do it on both columns. Don't forget to remember all the things that you did well and praise yourself for it, because that's how you feed that inner cheerleader that we all lack in, especially in my culture, in my generation. We are so fast to tell you all the things we did wrong, and then when you ask, okay, but what is it that's so cool that you did, it takes time to kind of dig deeper, trying to find what is that one good thing I did. So balancing that and being able to see the good and the bad and the ugly and everything in between, and being able to have an even count for that.
And I really appreciate this deep conversation in digging into not just adversity, but the tools that you use. And I really love what you said about confidence level can increase your sales or whatever that you want to achieve. Because I was talking to a millionaire, and he has a lot of doors in Texas, and he's always developing like new apartment and like bigger projects and in a real estate group like the world. And he's very charismatic. And I said, I want to be a millionaire like you. And then I want to learn. And I thought he was going to teach me, real estate development and business. And then I was hoping that maybe I could shadow him and then watch him. But what he said to me is, Juri, you need to feel beautiful and strong and confident within. When you can do that, you can be anything.
I think that's the key, because once I've realized that, in a sense, yes, my English is not perfect by no means. However, it's enough for me to communicate myself. It's enough for others to understand me. It's enough for me to share my ideas. Once I took away that feel of I'm scared, I'm afraid, I start realizing that, hey, I can be a badass. I have thoughts, ideas, I can share them, I can move forward, I can achieve things. And that confidence, it kind of comes and multiplies in a sense. And when we do feel, it's not enough for us to know that we're enough. It is about us feeling that we're enough. And that takes work. And that takes meeting those emotions and working with those emotions. And that's why I'm saying I wish I would have listened and gone to the therapist sooner, because while I was growing in my knowledge, I was growing in my skills, my emotions still needed work. So, and it was weighting me down because I couldn't get to that potential of mine, because I've had all these insecurities that I was hiding in the boxes. And when I could not carry the weight and everything went crumbling down, and when I felt like this isn't me, I've lost myself, I don't know who I am anymore, all those boxes, I had to face the emotion sooner or later. So don't wait to deal with those emotions. Well, you do need to separate to function, that's for sure, but don't neglect that part you separating. Some of it can be tossed out, sure. The feelings that the people are saying, the angry people who said they didn't mean what they said, for whatever reason they said it, some of those things can be just tossed. But some of those emotions are really deep, coming from childhood, coming from trauma, coming from all kind of an experience. So those should be dealt with in the sense of, let's look at it, not like what's wrong with you, but more like, what's wrong with you? Let's figure this out. It's just the tone. Sometimes it's just the tone of the voice, where you can go and say, come on. Or you can go and say, come on. You're saying the same thing, but you're saying it in a different way. So be that, come on, for yourself. Be that inviting parent you wish you had. Be that mentor you wish you had. Be that supporter you wish you had, because you can. fulfill that within. And once you fulfill it within, you are unstoppable. I'm working on it. I got the theory down. I just need the practice. It's a process. It really is, and it's work.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much. Let's ask you a last question, which is a gift. So, how would you say a gift that came from university?
Well, as I introduced myself, I am now a communication coach. So I help those who need help to find their voice. I started in my sales career. I end up in a sales department because I was doing too good. People were coming to me saying, "Hey, can you teach others?" So I end up being a corporate trainer. And I loved it. I loved the idea of contributing. I loved the idea of making a difference. And from there, I enjoyed it very much. And my older son was growing up, and I wanted him to have the tools, I wanted him to have the skills. And I couldn't find anything that could teach the skills. Again, he's 24 now, so that's 20 years ago. I thought, okay, with the help of the Toastmasters International, I thought, okay, I can teach him the skills. So I started teaching him the communication skills because I wanted him to feel confident, not just know that he can do it. I wanted him to feel that he can do it. So I started teaching him. From there, his friends started to come in and say, "Hey, can you teach us too?" And then from there, my youngest daughter, friends, parents start coming and saying, "Hey, how old do we have to be for you to teach us what you're teaching them?" So long story short, a Project BU, a nonprofit educational organization, was born 7 years ago to teach communication skills to youth, because I've discovered that I like working with the kids more because they are so pure, they're so sincere. If they like you, they're going to tell you. If they don't like you, they're going to tell you. You're going to feel it. You're going to know it. So I loved that pure connection and interactions I can get with them. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed where I could see that spark in their eyes. And quite honestly, and that's a totally different topic for the talk, I think our educational system can do better. So I feel as a parent, as an immigrant, as someone who overcame so much things based on communication, I need to contribute to the youth. I need to make the kids' life easier. I want to teach them the skills I wish I've had to make their life easier so they can springboard into their dreams. They can springboard into achieving their potential and not having to go through feeling like they're not enough. Unfortunately, a lot of my students who come to me come with that feeling. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. And a lot of it has to do with communication, because with technology, we are losing communication skills. We're not teaching communication skills in school. We teach kids how to write essays, and we teach them how to type the messages in the Google Classroom. And very rare we have this conversation where they talk and they connect and they know how to present themselves. And I'm noticing that more and more kids, younger and younger, coming to my classes because they are so in their bubble of, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, that they don't raise their hand in class even when they know the answer. And they can't make friends on the playground. So knowing that from my adversity, when I knew how it feels to not be understood, how it feels to not express yourself, how it feels to use the wrong words or not knowing how to use the words to share. And all of that I bring to the table with my classes to help our youth, the future generations, the future leaders, to get to that. I feel confident, because with words, to me, communication and confidence is one thing. If you're confident, you can communicate. And it goes the other way. If you can communicate, the confidence comes with it. So that's where the Project BU, from the adversity of not being able to communicate, of feeling like I wasn't enough or I wasn't good enough, now I can spread this feeling to others and help kids feel that they're enough, build their confidence, help them achieve their greatest potential. And the reason it is Project BU, because we are learning to embrace who we are. We don't have to be someone else. We can be who we are, and we can learn the skills to adapt, adjust, accommodate, to blend in, to stand out, whatever we need to do. We can learn those skills without having to change. So we separate in that I feel good, but I can fix this challenge. So we're working with that and we're building the confidence.
So a gift that came from my university is becoming a communication coach and then really teaching the younger generation too.
Yes, to be able to boost their confidence by sharing the things that I've came through and what I've overcame, and also being able to understand them. And you know what? Something crazy, because English is my second language. I am often able to explain things much better because my brain is now trained to dissect the big challenges into smaller segments so they can be understood. Just like when you hear something in English and it's something complicated, your brain, I'm pretty sure, automatically breaks it into small, chewable pieces to handle it, to comprehend, to translate, to understand, to deal with it. So, because of that, my brain is trained to explain things in a different way. And the crazy part is that that's the way everybody understands it. So my English is a second language now, giving me that opportunity to be able to be that one who can explain a very complex concept in small chewable pieces for even a kindergartners to deliver an ass-kicking speech on the stage.
I love it so much. I love that. I never thought about that. I do have that ability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, your perspective, the way you would problem solve, the way you process the information, all of that comes from that English as a second language, because your brain had to develop that skill to function. And that skill is priceless, because no other employee can solve the problem the way we do, because we know how to make something out of nothing. We know how to take this big and make it beautiful small things, because we had to. We were forced to face that adversity, and that adversity created that mindset that we have now. It's almost as that diamond that was made out of charcoal just because of the pressure. That's the gift. Each one of us has that gift. We just have to be willing to see it and let it shine through. And I am so excited that I do have my accent, that I don't understand the word sometimes, that I can break the ice by using the wrong word and telling stories, because that's who makes me me, and that's what makes me different.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Anna. You empowered me so much, and you let me understand some tools that I didn't even have, that I didn't even know that I had, actually, to break it down to pieces and present. And then you're so right. You're so right about that. And then I never thought about it. And then I'm really good at producing, organizing, problem solving, and doing multi things. And I think that came from these challenges that I faced when I was 18 and crying. And so maybe my tears were not so much of the waste at the end.
No, it's an experience that makes you you right now.
That's true.
Giving this gift to the world of sharing the adversities and helping others to be okay just by hearing other stories. You are amazing.
Thank you so much, Anna. You are amazing too. Well, thank you again for this conversation, and I really appreciate you. And then for our audience to tuning in, and then please share this episode if you know somebody who went through the similar adversity. And then I have more exciting guests coming in this month and then next month. So we will see you next time.
Thank you for having me. Have a wonderful evening.
You
Bye.
too.